Today is going to be a very interesting video. It is about Sam Harris. Now, Sam Harris, if you don't know him, he is one of the faces of New Atheism. So these guys are pretty much atheistic philosophers, excellent speakers, academics, really, really smart people. That would probably include Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris. They really are one of these advocates for this new atheist ideal, secular humanism. It's very interesting. Nonetheless, I want to make this statement quite clear. Sam Harris is a real smart guy, really smart. If you don't like Sam Harris because he doesn't share a Christian worldview or a theistic worldview, that he's an atheist or agnostic, it doesn't take away from the fact that he is a brilliant academic and he's a really smart guy. And we must take into account that he has debated the best of the best. In this particular clip that we're actually going to analyze is actually a debate between Sam Harris and Dr. William Lane Craig. I really encourage you to watch it. I'll put the link of it in the description. And the thing is this, is that when you go up against these type of people, you really got to know your stuff. And the reason we're analyzing this today is Sam Harris, who is a secular humanist, someone that appeals to the collective good, and we'll get into that in a moment. Essentially, we've watched him take on the best of the best, do pretty well, and essentially he has had a massive downfall, like a burning crash to the ground in terms of his ethics and his principles, which we're going to review in a later clip. And the reason we're going to watch this is because it's very important to understand that no matter how brilliant you are as an atheist or as a secular humanist, they're going to run into the same problems, always, that it always ends up in. When you appeal to an objective standard, but simultaneously say it doesn't exist. Okay? The idea that these secular humanists, these new atheists, essentially are appealing to what they define as the collective good. The collective good, what is it? It's a very subjective process. Essentially, they are being the moral arbiters of the universe. And what they do is they appeal to these objective standards that essentially come from them. So they will say that God doesn't exist because what God says in the Bible is morally reprehensible. And so there seems to be a bit of an issue where they take from a theistic worldview in order to argue against it. And we see this constantly. And throughout this first clip, so you get an idea, the title of this clip that I took it from YouTube was that, watch Sam Harris destroy Christianity within 10 minutes. And we're going to go through it because I want you to understand his worldview. I want you to understand how he views Christianity. He sees God as some moral arbiter that is a figment of our imagination, that he can just arbitrarily decide what's right and what's wrong and all these things, and that's morally reprehensible, and he uses the problem of evil in order to justify it, the idea of suffering, which essentially has a issue as well when you use the idea of evil to argue against God, because if God doesn't exist, good and evil doesn't exist, ultimately. Not to say that evil comes from God, but it's what's described as a privation, that evil is the absence of good. Okay? There's a theological understanding as to why that's the case, but notwithstanding that, he is using these arguments to argue against the existence of God and to refer us to this idea of a secular humanist standard of morality that we should employ that is governed by the collective good, which is God knows what. It's very arbitrary how you decide what the collective good is. But watch this video and we'll be able to see his view. And then we're going to see a most recent clip, and you may have seen it on the Trigonometry podcast, where he crashes and burns, where he throws all ethics and principles out the window. And it's interesting because ultimately the atheistic worldview is somewhat cannibalistic. It eats itself alive in the end and doesn't end in a good place. And we've got a lot of historical examples to prove that. But notwithstanding that, let's get into the clip.
Well, that was all very interesting. Ask yourselves, what is wrong with spending eternity in hell? Well, I'm told it's rather hot there, for one. Dr. Craig is not offering an alternative view of morality. Okay, the whole point of Christianity, or so it is imagined, is to safeguard the eternal well-being of human souls. Now, happily, there's absolutely no evidence that the Christian hell exists. Okay, and I think we should look at the consequences of believing in this framework, this theistic framework, in this world, and what these moral underpinnings actually would be. All right. 9 million children die every year before they reach the age of 5. Okay, picture an Asian tsunami of the sort we saw.
So what we're going to see now is the argument for the problem of evil. How can an all-powerful and all-knowing God allow evil in the world? It's a contradiction, so therefore God must not be good. God doesn't exist because of the suffering in the world. You're going to see the start of this now.
That killed 250,000 people. One of those every 10 days, killing children only under 5. Okay, it's 24,000 children a day, 1,000 an hour, 17 or so a minute. That means before I can get to the end of this sentence, some few children, very likely, will have died in terror and agony. Okay, think of the parents of these children. Think of the fact that most of these men and women believe in God and are praying at this moment for their children to be spared. And their prayers will not be answered. Okay, but according to Dr. Craig, this is all part of God's plan. Any God who would allow children by the millions to suffer and die in this way, and their parents to grieve in this way, either can do nothing to help them or doesn't care to. He is therefore either impotent or evil. And worse than that, on Dr. Craig's view, most of these people, many of these people certainly, will be going to hell because they're praying to the wrong God. Just think about that. Okay, through no fault of their own, they were born into the wrong culture where they got the wrong theology and they missed the revelation. Okay, there are 1.2 billion people in India at this moment. Most of them are Hindus, most of them therefore polytheists. Okay, in Dr. Craig's universe, no matter how good these people are, they are doomed. If you are praying to the monkey god Hanuman, you are doomed. Okay. You will be tortured in hell for eternity. Now, is there the slightest evidence for this? No. It just says so in Mark 9 and Matthew 13 and Revelation 14.
On a separate note, the idea of cherry-picking verses out of the Bible to say that people that have never met God and never known God being cast into hell by no fault of their own is somewhat of a straw man argument. Now, we won't get into the theological arguments in terms of soteriology and salvation. We can do that for a separate video, but this is quite a misrepresentation of the text. There's answers for these questions, which in the debate, Dr. William Lane Craig actually goes over.
Perhaps you'll remember from the Lord of the Rings, it says when the elves die, they go to Valinor, but they can be reborn in Middle-earth. I say that just as a point of comparison.
He also says that to be a bit of a smart aleck. The irony of the situation is that the Lord of the Rings never claims to be true. The Bible does. And simultaneously, J.R. Tolkien was pretty much a Catholic philosopher himself and used the Bible as a source of inspiration for the Lord of the Rings. That's what's somewhat funny.
Okay, so God created the cultural isolation of the Hindus. Okay, he engineered the circumstance of their deaths in ignorance of revelation. And then he created the penalty for this ignorance, which is an eternity of conscious torment in fire. Okay, on the other hand, on Dr. Craig's account, your run-of-the-mill serial killer in America, okay, who spent his life raping and torturing children, need only come to God, come to Jesus on death row, and after a final meal of fried chicken, he's going to spend an eternity in heaven after death. Okay, one thing should be crystal clear to you. This vision of life has absolutely nothing to do with moral accountability.
On that note, in the atheistic worldview, there is no redemption. It doesn't really matter. It's just cosmic stardust running into one another. In the Christian worldview, yeah, only God knows your heart, only knows if you're truly repentant. But yeah, there's salvation even for the worst of us. Pretty cool if that's true, right?
Okay, and please notice the double standard that people like Dr. Craig use to exonerate God from all this evil. Okay, we're told that God is loving and kind and just and intrinsically good, But when someone like myself points out the rather obvious and compelling evidence that God is cruel and unjust because he visits suffering on innocent people of a scope and scale that would embarrass the most ambitious psychopath, okay, we're told that God is mysterious. Okay, who can understand God's will? Okay, and yet this is precisely, this merely human understanding of God's will is precisely what believers use to establish his goodness in the first place. You know, something good happens to a Christian. He feels some bliss while praying, say, or he sees some positive change in his life, and we're told that God is good. Okay, but when children by the tens of thousands are torn from their parents' arms and drowned, we're told that God is mysterious. Okay, this is how you play tennis without the net.
I mean, on that note, what is the cost of free will? I mean, someone who supported COVID and the COVID jabs, and what about all those children that are now suffering from myocarditis? All the studies now are coming out from the mainstream media. Did Sam Harris, did you support those vaccines? Did you encourage people to go get vaccinated? What about the children? What about those children that are suffering, that will die within 5 years because they got myocarditis? Should you be held accountable for that? What is the cost of free will? What is the cost of sin? It seems to have generational effects, hence Adam and Eve.
And I want to suggest to you that it is not only tiresome when otherwise intelligent people speak this way, it is morally reprehensible.
According to who? According to Sam. That's the key.
Okay, this kind of faith is really the perfection of narcissism. I mean, God loves me. Don't you know? He cured me of my eczema. He makes me feel so good while singing in church. And just when we had given up hope, he found a banker who was willing to reduce my mother's mortgage. Okay. Given all that this God of yours does not accomplish in the lives of others, given the misery that's being imposed on some helpless child at this instant, this kind of faith is obscene. Okay, to think in this way is to fail to reason honestly or to care sufficiently about the suffering of other human beings. And if God is good and loving and just and kind, and he wanted to guide us morally with a book, why give us a book that supports slavery? Why give us a book that admonishes us to kill people for imaginary crimes like witchcraft?
Straw man arguments here. Slavery in the colonial sense is not an accurate representation of slavery in the Bible. I will do another video on that, but there's a great book called Is God a Moral Monster? I'll link it in the description below if you want to extrapolate on that. But there's a variety of forms of slavery in the Bible. Indebted servitude was one of them. You could enter slavery if you couldn't pay off a debt for 7 years, and then you had to be released, or you could voluntarily stay in servitude or in slavery to your master if they treated you well. So not an accurate representation.
Now, of course, there's a way of not taking these questions to heart. Okay, according to Dr. Craig's divine command theory, God is not bound by moral duties. God doesn't have to be good. Whatever he commands is good. So when he commands that the Israelites to slaughter the Amalekites, that behavior becomes intrinsically good because he commanded it. Okay, well, here we're being offered, I'm glad he raised the issue of psychopathy. We're being offered a psychopathic and psychotic moral attitude. It's psychotic because this is completely delusional. There's no reason to believe that we live in a universe ruled by an invisible monster, Yahweh.
On that note, please remember what he says now. Divine command theory. Let's just remember that.
But it is psychopathic because this is a total detachment from the well-being of human beings. This so easily rationalizes the slaughter of children. Okay, just think about the Muslims at this moment who are blowing themselves up, okay, convinced that they are agents of God's will. There is absolutely nothing that Dr. Craig can say against their behavior in moral terms, apart from his own faith-based claim that they're praying to the wrong God. If they had the right God, what they were doing would be good on divine command theory. Now, I'm obviously not saying that Dr. Craig or all religious people are psychopaths and psychotics, but this to me is the true horror of religion. It allows perfectly decent and sane people to believe by the billions what only lunatics could believe on their own. If you wake up tomorrow morning thinking that saying a few Latin words over your pancakes is going to turn them into the body of Elvis Presley, you have lost your mind. But if you think more or less the same thing about a cracker and the body of Jesus, you're just a Catholic. And I'm not the first person to notice that it's a very strange sort of loving God who would make salvation depend on believing in him on bad evidence. I mean, if you lived 2,000 years ago, there was evidence galore. I mean, he was just performing miracles. But apparently he got tired of being so helpful. And so now we all inherit this very heavy burden of the doctrine's implausibility. And the effort to square it with what we now know about the cosmos and what we know about the all-too-human origins of Scripture becomes more and more difficult.
On that note, zero progress on the origin of life. Instead, they're actually going backwards. So his worldview is miracles don't exist as long as you give me one to start with, and that's life. Just noteworthy.
And it's not just the generic God that Dr. Craig is recommending. It is God the Father and Jesus the Son. Christianity, on Dr. Craig's account, is the true moral wealth of the world. Well, I hate to break it to you here at Notre Dame, but Christianity is a cult of human sacrifice. Christianity is not a religion that repudiates human sacrifice. It is a religion that celebrates a single human sacrifice as though it were effective.
Please remember this too.
God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. John 3:16. The idea is that Jesus suffered the crucifixion so that none need suffer hell, except those billions in India and billions like them throughout history. This is astride. This doctrine is astride a contemptible history of scientific ignorance and religious barbarism. We come from people who used to bury children under the foundations of new buildings as offerings to their imaginary gods. I mean, just think about that. In vast numbers of societies, people would bury children in post holes, people like ourselves thinking that this would prevent an invisible being from knocking down their buildings. These are the sorts of people who wrote the Bible. If there is a less moral framework than the one Dr. Craig is proposing, I haven't heard of it.
Now, you got a good idea of the way Sam Harris actually thinks of Christianity, okay? That's pretty much sums up his view or his understanding of it, okay? Now, we're about to watch a clip of him recently in the last 2 years of doing a podcast with trigonometry. Awesome podcast. I'll link it in below for you guys to watch it. And this is his understanding. This is how he looks at what happened during the Trump election of 2020 when the Hunter Biden laptop story was basically swept under the rug by the mainstream media. They said it wasn't true, it's a fake story, a Russian hoax, and it turned out it was true. You know, the Chinese basically had all these evidence against him. There's horrible things on the laptop, which we don't need to discuss right now. And essentially that could have swayed the election. The FBI had it, the mainstream media knew it was real, the FBI knew it was real, and everyone said it's a fake story in order to just get past the election to support Joe Biden winning. You could make an argument that this was a conspiracy. Now they're talking about this. Now, watch Sam Harris, the secular humanist, based on the collective good and his subjective understanding of what is ethical and moral within a democratically elected society. Remember, this is his ethics and his principles as according to Sam Harris, how he justifies what happened in the 2020 election. Let's have a look at it. He's not a fan of Trump, okay? And you're going to see a different side to how when he has a moral justification, for something as reprehensible as, say, Donald Trump being elected. That's how he feels about democratic principles and ethics. Let's have a look.
He's got a habit of doing that.
Yeah. No, but I'll just say, just finally, again, it's like a coin toss for me, the Hunter Biden laptop thing, because I do understand how corrosive it is for an institution like the New York Times to show obvious bias and inconsistency and dishonesty in how it's like they couldn't even frame it honestly. It's not like it's like the way I would frame it is, listen, I don't care what's in Hunter Biden's. I mean, Hunter Biden at that point, Hunter Biden literally could have had the corpses of children in his basement. I would not have cared.
So just on that note, I know you might think this is hyperbole, but he means it. He means it. You can go over in other clips and review these comments that he made, but he genuinely means it. He considers Trump so bad that it didn't matter if there was just sacrificed dead children, skeletons in Hunter Biden's laptop. It didn't matter because Trump was the epitome of evil, okay? That's how he views it. Now, just remember what he said about human sacrifice earlier, what he says about sacrificing children. He talks about the reprehensible nature of Yahweh being the moral arbiter. Quite interesting. Quite interesting.
Right. It's like there's nothing. First of all, it's Hunter Biden, right? It's not Joe Biden. But even if whatever scope of Joe Biden's corruption is, like if we could just go down that rabbit hole endlessly and understand that he's getting kickbacks from Hunter Biden's deals in Ukraine or wherever else, right? Or China. It is infinitesimal compared to the corruption we know Trump is involved in. It's like a firefly to the sun, right? I mean, like there's just it doesn't even stack up against Trump University, right? Trump University as a story is worse than anything that could be in Hunter Biden's laptop, in my view, right? Now that doesn't answer the people who say it's still
including dead children, apparently. It's not a big deal in the atheistic worldview.
Completely unfair to not have looked at the laptop in a timely way and to have shut down the New York Post's Twitter account. Like that's just a conspiracy. That's a left-wing conspiracy to deny the presidency to Donald Trump. Absolutely, it was. Absolutely, right.
So just so you heard it, he's saying it was a conspiracy. It was. Is it any moral justification for doing that? A conspiracy to overthrow a democratically elected president? Let's see.
But I think it was warranted, right? And again, it's a coin toss as to whether or not
Sam, I'm sorry.
That particular piece.
I'm really sorry. I was the one that said we should move on, but you've just said
it.
something I really struggle with there, which is
the kids in the basement.
The kids in the basement. I'm interested in democracy. You're saying you are content with a left-wing conspiracy to prevent somebody being democratically re-elected as president.
Well, no, I'm content. Well, but the thing is, it's just not left-wing, right? So Liz Cheney is not left-wing, right? Liz Cheney is doing everything in her power.
You're content with a conspiracy to prevent somebody being democratically elected.
But there's nothing, conspiracy, it's not, it was a conspiracy out in the open. But it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter what part's conspiracy, what part's out in the open. I mean, I think it's like, if people get together and talk about what should...
All right, now you're going to see him scramble. This is the end of Sam Harris and his ethics and his principle and his whole worldview, when he's willing to overthrow democracy in order to protect it. See, this is the contradictory nature, the cannibalistic nature of atheism. You can justify anything according to you because there is no objective standard. According to you, when you're held accountable to it, it's not applicable. You can destroy democracy in your attempt to protect it. You see, you start to see that secular humanism has been done before, under Stalin, under Mao, under Pol Pot. How many people were killed in that? Stalin, arguably 30 to 50 million. Mao, 50 to 100 million. Pol Pot, 2 odd million, 3 million. They had the same thing. They could morally justify killing people themselves and overthrowing the democratic process. So whether you like it or not, we are now seeing right now the end of Sam Harris. There is no objective standard, and that's clear. It's only Sam Harris, The moral arbiter of the universe. That's the title he wears. Now watch him now justify it.
What we do about this phenomenon, if it's like if there was an asteroid hurtling toward Earth, and we got in a room together with all of our friends and had a conversation about what we could do to deflect its course, right? Is that a conspiracy? Like some of that conversation would be in public, some of it would be in private. We have a massive problem. We have an existential threat, right? Politically speaking, I consider Trump an existential threat to our democracy, right? Now, he's not going to destroy the world, very likely.
If you destroy democracy in the process of protecting democracy...
No, but that doesn't destroy... No, I'm not...
And now we start to see it snowball and get worse for Sam. Continue watching.
What I'm not suggesting, at no point was I suggesting we should stuff ballots or actually break the machinery of democracy. But political opinion is already being just completely inundated with misinformation, biased takes, half-truths, and outright lies, right? Or just the amplification of bad or misleading information based on the algorithm, right? So it's already just an abattoir of opinion, right? And
right now he's saying nothing. Right now in his head, he's saying, I can't believe I said that on camera. That's what he's saying. And now it's just words coming out and we're waffling. We're just waffling. Because the secular humanist that prides himself on democratic principles and the collective good just admitted that he's willing to destroy it because of his hatred for Trump.
Now the question is, what can you do with your own biases and your own to get the outcome you think is actually better, not just for yourself personally, but for the world, right? So I'm completely unconflicted in
the collective good coming to save the day. Sorry, Sam. Sorry. You threw that out the door when you threw out democracy. Now who's playing the moral arbiter of the universe? Now who's being arbitrary about who should be elected and who shouldn't? What is democracy and what isn't? What is it to destroy it and what is it to protect it?
In the claim that a first Trump term was bad and a second Trump term would be bad, and it literally doesn't matter what else was on the menu. Like literally, pick a random American better than Trump in the Oval Office. Like the likelihood that you're going to get someone who's worse than Trump, given what I consider is bad about Trump, it's on the order of 1 in a million, right? Like you're not going to get worse than Trump if you pick at random. And Hillary Clinton, for all of her flaws, was not worse than Trump. Joe Biden, we could have known Joe Biden was going to just be comatose in office, not worse than Trump.
I'm not a fan of Trump. I actually don't think he's a real Christian. I know there's a lot of American evangelicals that support him. I do think he's a narcissistic egomaniac. I really do. But notwithstanding that, if we actually look at Trump's foreign policy, maybe the first president since Kennedy to not have a war. We had world peace for 4 years. Stepped into North Korea. Russia had invaded Ukraine. And what happened within 2 years of Joe Biden? We're on the verge of world war. I wonder how he feels about Joe Biden's foreign policy now.
Right. Kamala Harris not worth it's all and again, it's not just a marginal call. It's just these are people who are normal politicians who are so much more constrained by predictable machinery, right? There's such less of an opportunity there to destroy institutions that we have to rely on, right? With any of those people in charge, including
these hosts are you can tell in the look on their faces, like, what is he talking about? Yeah, this is waffle. This is all waffle.
A random person in charge, a random person who's going to be terrified at the responsibility of the office and default to expert opinion, across the board. No, Trump is an Alex Jones level figure for me. And so, it's analogous.
So this is the end of the video. I encourage everyone to watch both the debate and also this trigonometry podcast. It is quite clear that the real evil is when someone takes it upon themselves to decide what is democracy and what is not, what is moral and what is not. And it is, whether we like it or not, the Sam Harris is the God of the universe. According to Sam Harris, his own intellect is that God that we should all worship. That is the consequence of his atheistic worldview. That is what he's suggesting for everyone to follow Sam and his understanding of morality and democracy and ethics and principles. Well, no thank you, Sam. I'll follow Jesus. I'll continue to follow him to the day I die. And the bottom line is that I pray that you find Jesus. I pray that you find the source of morality, the source of love and grace and mercy. On that note, if you've enjoyed this video, I really encourage you to like it and to comment, or if you don't like it, feel free not to like it, but still comment. And if you do enjoy this content, I really appreciate a subscribe. This is the first time I've done a video like this, but it seems that this type of content you guys are enjoying from what I'm seeing on the analytics. So I look forward to doing the next one. See yous.